talk to all the prisoners, I talk to kids. The poverty there, of course, is intense. The slums that I went to see were plastic and carton and planks and chicken wire. And they were like from miles. It wasn't even just a few places. It was from miles, people living there. And the funny thing about Mexico is that it's just across the border from the richest country in the world. If you go to El Paso, it's another world. El Paso is like two different worlds right next to each other. You can't even imagine it. You know, you have a Calcutta, and then you have El Paso. It's like, wow, how can you? And a big, huge wall that separates everybody. And so, to me, it really doesn't represent just Mexico. It represents all the Americas. It represents all poor people. It represents everybody who's ever had to struggle. You know what I'm talking about. It's like the world is being blocked out by a huge wall, but it's really not about Mexico. It's about any one of us that tries to survive. I'm going to read another poem, and all my poems have stories, and I don't have any particular chronological way to tell them, but just read them. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote when I was 16 years old. People know that I was in gangs, I was on drugs. I was very young when I got out of it, and my son here, by the way, Ramiro, he also joined gangs, and that was part of the story. But I will tell you that me and Ramiro are very close, we love each other, but he suffered a lot during that period, and I suffered a lot seeing him go through this. He ended up doing 15 years total, 13 and a half years, the last prison sentence he had in the Illinois Department of Corrections. He's doing better now, but it's really sad to have to go through that life. I was in the gangs, I got involved, I got arrested for many things. I was a heroin addict, but by the age of 20, by the time he was born, I was done. I was no longer on drugs, I was no longer going to jail, and he, in many ways, saved my life because I was 20 years old and I had him in my arms, and I made this promise I'm going to be the best dad possible. And it was very sincere. Unfortunately, because of my own issues, my own traumas, my own pains, I pretty much abandoned him and his sister 2.5 years later. And that's just part of the story. It's a really rough story, but I do feel, at least I feel, that we worked really hard on that part, you know what I'm saying? I want to read you this poem because in many ways it was I was a murderer's row when I was 16 years old in Los Angeles. And there was 3 people killed in a riot, and they were going to charge half a dozen of us for the murders. And they couldn't do it, but they already had done the damage. They put us in an adult facility. I had a son next to Charles Manson when he was going to trial. The first night I was there, they tried to kill me, the 2 murders I was in. I was 16 years old, and I was trying to defend a 13-year-old, and there was a 15-year-old and another 16-year-old. I was trying to protect the younger guys, and you had to stand up to them. But one of the interesting things that happened, I survived all that, but I wrote a poem. It's kind of weird. I'm sitting in jail, and this really crazy, they tore down that jail, by the way. I always wanted to go back there because I know I have my name graffitied on the walls there. I wanted to go back there and take a picture of me next to the jail, but they tore it all down. All the bars were taken down. Like, oh, what a shame. There's so much story there. That particular jail had Sirhan. It had Charles Manson. It had all these famous murders that he had. So I wanted to get a picture of me. And he also had me, even though I didn't really murder anybody, but the point is, I was there with them. So, and it's kind of sad that you would have people who don't murder people possibly charged for murder, but that happens, as you know. And I'm very fortunate I got through it, but you know, it's possible that I could have got in for something that I didn't do. So this poem comes to me, and I honestly, it was badly written, but I fixed it up years later, and I kept the kernel of it. So I don't want you to think that I actually wrote it this way. My very disclosure, I fixed it up. Yeah, I didn't really know how to write, but I knew that I was writing. I was beginning to do something. I didn't know how to use grammar. I didn't know how to put, but I was writing, and that became my destiny. So the poem is called The Calling, because in many ways I was being called at that moment to do what I do now. It goes like this. The calling came to me while I languished in my room, while I withered away my youth in jail cells and damp body fields. It called me to life out of captivity in a street-scarred and tattooed place I called body. Until then I waited silently, a deafening clamor in my head, hidden from America's eyes, a brown boy without a name. I would sing into a solitary tape recorder, music never to be heard. I would write my thoughts in scrambled English. I would take photos in my mind, plan out new parks, bushy green, concrete free, new places to play and think. Waiting, then it came. It forced me out of my room. It brought me to, it allowed me to escape night captors and street prisons. It called me to war, to be writer, to be scientist. and marched with the soldiers of change. It called me from the shadows, out of the wreckage of my barrio, from among those who did not exist. I waited all of 16 years for this time. Somehow, unexpected, I was called. So, thank you. My work with youth, since I've been doing this work, is to get them to find that calling. Sometimes it comes when you're at your lowest point in your life. Sometimes it comes, oh, you don't know where it is, but you're being called to a destiny. And most of us refuse it. We don't get it. We're scared of it. We don't even know what's happening. We don't live the lives that we're supposed to live. So this is what I use to help young people understand. I work with kids. I've been going to prisons for 35 years. And even though my son ended up in prison, I actually took him to one or two of the prisons I went to speak, and he did very well speaking to them. It's fortunate that he would end up in some of those prisons. But I do that because I wanted to give back. I was saved from all the things that a lot of my friends did not get saved from. I lost 25 friends by the time I was 18. Half of all my homies ended up in prison, long-term prison terms. All of them became heroin addicts, every single one of them. There was not one person in my generation or my neighborhood that wasn't a heroin addict. So I lost so many people, and I'm fortunate that I made it where I did, and I went to find this destiny. I want to share one other poem, and then I want to just talk to you guys a little bit. Is that okay? Because the poetry is great, but I also want to talk about things. So I'm going to share a poem that I wrote about the so-called immigrants coming over. I call them so-called. Josie here I just met her, but she's a good friend of my son. She does a lot of work in the Native community. Me and my son, we do work in the Native community, Native American, Native Mexican, Native Central American. My mother is Native from Chihuahua, and if you know the tribe there, they're known as Tarumaras. They're actually called Rarámuri. And I have gone there. I spent time there. They live in the Copper Canyons of Mexico, which has one of the few cave dwellers in the world. 80,000 of these Native people live in caves. And I went there, and I was totally amazed at how they were living in these caves. And the traditional people, what everybody calls the Gentiles, because the ones that aren't traditional are either Catholic or evangelical. So now they're at war with the traditional natives. It's terrible. And when they go to war with their, I'm not talking about arguments, they actually go to religion and kill people. And so I went with the traditional and got to know them, and they were so hateful of Mexicans, believe it or not. They don't call themselves Mexicans, even though they're in Mexico. And they thought I was Mexican. But when I told them that I was looking for my roots, they were so happy to hear it, and they opened the doors. I couldn't find my family. My grandmother and my great-grandmother left that area during the Mexican Revolution, and we don't know where they actually came from. When they ended up in Chihuahua City, they were renamed, because whatever indigenous names they had, they got rid of them, and they named them Manuela and Ana. So we don't know what their real names are. But I went back, and they were so beautiful. And so, to me, the immigrants that are coming from that part of the world can't be immigrants, because they're part of this land. You understand what I'm saying? They're migrants. They're not like from other parts of the world. Not that anything's wrong with anybody from other parts of the world, but the point is, they're part of this land. So I always think it's strange that now the brown-skinned, red-brown people of this land are treated as immigrants, illegals, and foreigners. Like, what happened there? How come now we don't belong? And, it's like everybody gets turned on its head. So I wrote this I'm going to read this poem about running to America, only because it came from an image I saw where at one point there was 300 people on the border, and they were waiting for a break and just all run at once. So the immigration would get a few, but there were so many running that most of them got away. And it was just an amazing madness. It's a kind of craziness that we've done. We put a border, now native peoples have to run to get to the other side, and they're all, it's a madness. And so this is called Running to America. And it's dedicated to my parents who were migrants. It goes like this. They are night shadows, violating borders. Fingers curled through chain link fences, hiding from infrared eyes, dodging dirty bullets. They leave familiar smells, warmth, and sounds as ancient as the trampled stones, running to America. There is a woman in her finest border crossing wear, a purple blouse from an older sister, a pair of worn shoes from a church bazaar, a tattered coat from a former lover. There's a child dressed in black, fear sparkling from dark Indian eyes, clinging to a headless Barbie doll. And the men, some hard and quiet, others young and loud. You see something like this in prisons. Soon they will cross on their bellies, kissing black earth, then run to America. Strange voices whisper behind garbage cans, beneath freeway passes, next to broken bottles. The spatter of words textured in multicolor invoke demons. They must run to America. I could keep reading because I love poetry, I love to read, and as you know, these stories cover a lot of ground. I really feel that I guess there's a big calling for me is to not just give voice, but to talk to people. I was a very shy, broken down kid. I couldn't put two words together. Now nobody can shut me up. I'm constantly talking. Last year, some of you know, I ran for vice president of the Justice Party, which didn't have any money, but we got to speak. I was in the media, whatever media was interested in. Most media didn't cover it, but you'd be surprised how many people were interested. And we did get some attention. I think the last numbers was overall the Justice Party got 40,000 people.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that ain't millions, hey, but
That's good.
that's not bad considering there's no money and all we did was talk to issues. And I'm not like for the Justice Party just for I want to be British Party. I'm for new voices. I'm for us challenging the two-party system that is really becoming the same. And I'm for us trying to make sure that we don't get lost in all this stuff. When I heard that there was close to $3 billion in the last presidential election, it's like, I'm done with that politics. You know what I'm saying? Where money rules. Where it's who's got the money is going to get in. And that is not what we should have in this country. It's not what we have anywhere. I am very much concerned because I think in our country, my son knows this because he's very active with the youth here. He knows that they're under so much violence, there's so much. But you know, I'm going to tell you something. That didn't happen by no accident. You understand? I know when the guns and the drugs came in, it happened at the same time. And it happened at the same time around the country. There was no accident. In Watts, they tell the story of how all of a sudden the boxcar was left at one of the tracks, and then somebody opened it, nothing but guns in there. In the tracks right there, just in the middle of the ghetto, because people knew they're going to go to war. Why? They deindustrialized the country. Chicago, great example. No more jobs. They couldn't feed nobody anymore. So what are they going to do? They have them kill each other. And drugs and guns were like perfect ingredients to do that. You know what I'm saying? They knew what they were doing. It came at the same time in all the major industrial cities. Chicago being the main industrial city. And then, believe it or not, LA is industrial city. People don't know that because they always think about Hollywood. It's a huge industrial city. It actually has more manufacturing than any city in the country. And they lost so much. That's why the first big major violent communities ended up being those communities such like Detroit, we lost that auto industry, like Chicago, where all this meat packing and steel mills and everything was taken away, like LA, where a lot of the garment and canneries and aerospace, all the industry that was there. I live in a community right now that used to be called the Mexican side of the San Fernando Valley. And you can't say that no more because Mexicans are everywhere. So, there's no more Mexicans. But it used to have a big GM plant, huge. It used to have a big foundry, and that's why people came. And the GM plant closed. Now they got a big strip mall called the Plant.
No.
And I was like, okay, there's no job, but they got a big strip mall. And they started to do this thing called gang injunctions, which some of you people in Chicago might know as mob action laws, where 2 or 3 guys could stand in a corner, they arrest them. And in LA, believe it or not, they started the first one in 1982 against my neighborhood, of all neighborhoods. And now they have 40 gang injunctions against 72 neighborhoods, all black and brown. Not one white nor Asian, it's all black and brown. And there are, the laws that they have there, anybody knows mob action, you know what I'm talking about, are laws that even in third world war country dictators don't even do. There's a 6 o'clock curfew. 2 or 3 people cannot stand on the corner. If you have cell phones, bats, chains, anything, you could be arrested. Anybody that gets arrested has to be photographed and put in a database. This is the United States. This is happening. It happened in Chicago, by the way. The mob action thing that nobody complained about was happening in all these neighborhoods. And now they perfected it now, where they got mob action, things going on, gang injunctions they call them, but it's the same thing. What happened in LA is, and that's going on in Chicago, is they squeeze all these communities. The gentrification came in, big money. So now you're seeing Chicago gangs everywhere in the country and LA gangs everywhere in the country. You know what I'm saying? And in Delaware, there was a huge gang war between a Chicago gang and an LA gang in Delaware. And they just squeezed these communities, and they didn't stop the gang violence, they just spread it out. And unfortunately, the LA gang violence has become international. Not only did it spread out in Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, they have Cholo gang members in Cambodia. They have them in Armenia, because a lot of the immigrants that came from Cambodia, Armenia, became Cholo gang members, and they ended up reporting them. So now they're reporting the gang violence as well as the culture. See what I'm saying? In Belize, there's Crips and Bloods in all the communities there. Because a lot of Belizeans ended up in South Central, they deported them, now they're overrunning everything. So what I'm talking about is a very cynical country that we have to help change. You know what I'm saying? A country that just has lost its way, doesn't know how to feed its people, doesn't know how to deal with the terrible, I'm talking about bankers, they're robbing people right and left and they're still doing it. Nobody's been made accountable for all the terrible destruction of our homes and everything else. And this is why I do what I do. Not only through poetry, through my activism, because I have a cultural center in the Valley now where me and my wife run, but through things like the Justice Party. Get out and speak and talk to people. So to me, that's what I'm interested in. What I want to do is see if I can open up to you all. This is a great group. I really appreciate you being here, but I'd like a little dialogue. See if we can talk. I'm open to talk about anything. I do have some books and stuff if you're interested. This one is my CD with poetry. I don't sing. I can't play an instrument. I can't carry a tune. But what I did is I started a band, and I guess David Hernandez was my inspiration for that. And David Hernandez was a good friend of mine, and he's passed on, but he was a great inspiration. So I started this band called Seven Rabbit because that is my native name. I was given a native name, Chico Metosli, which in Nahuatl translates into Seven Rabbit, so I called the band Seven Rabbit. Unfortunately, like I was telling them, we played a couple gigs in LA and I wanted to take them on the road with me. Nobody would pay for the band. So it's just too much. You got to feed them, you got to get one. And we didn't have a bus like all these great rock and roll guys. So the band disbanded. But I still have them recorded, and it's all original music by my friend Ernie Perez. He did all original music, and it's kind of got that, my favorite music is the 70s funk. You know, so it's got that kind of funk vibe. So I told him I wanted that. So he got it, and then so it's just me reading my poetry and doing the band. So I'm giving these $2. If you got $2, you can have them. Yes, and only that because some of them are cracked. So I said, well, okay, I'll give you guys the best. Normally we sell for about 10, but if you got $2, you can get one. This, unfortunately, I do have to sell for the price because it comes from a bookstore. By the way, me and my wife started the only bookstore for 500,000 people in LA. There's no bookstore, no movie houses in LA. In the Valley, but it's part of LA. And the Valley, I know people say, they're like that. They don't think they're part of LA. The Valley is part of LA. It's got close to 3 million people, and it was trying to break away from LA, and if it did, it would have been like the 4th or 5th largest city in the country.
Luis, let's clarify. The CD is not cracked, the jewel case.
Yeah, that made me cry.
It's cracked.
The jewel case is the but yeah, so the Valley, and so I found that even though you got a rich entertainment capital of the world, which is LA, right? You got whole communities, miles and miles, no culture centers, no movie houses, no bookstores. And you go to Chicago, it's the same thing. I know, because you go to some of these neighborhoods, there's nothing going on. They concentrate the arts, and the rest of the people are kind of left. But I think Chicago is a little bit better than LA. And there's block parties, I think Chicago is a little bit more alive. LA, they just completely have destroyed culture, So we created a bookstore culture space, and now it's the biggest thing going. We just had a Celebrating Words festival this Sunday. Close to 700 to 1,000 people showed up. Yeah, we had stages, music, poetry, we had spoken word, we had panels on banned books, we had books everywhere, We even have book giveaways because we get books donated and we just give people eat it up. We have a table full of books. In less than 2 hours, they're gone.
Oh, yeah.
People are hungry for this stuff. So anyway, I just want to talk with you. I can keep talking. Anybody have? Yeah.
What about, what I don't understand is how come the Black Panther Party was like annihilated, and then we have all these gangs yet?
Exactly.
You know, it seems to me like they were eradicated quite successfully, and yet all these gangs have sprung up all over the place. And why is that? What do you think that is?
Well, here's the thing. If you've seen that movie, I think it was an HBO called Bastards of the Party. It was done by my friend Clay Sloan. When the Crips and Bloods were uniting during the LA rebellion, that period, I went back there. I was living in Chicago. I went back there. I met with people, and I was helping the Bloods and Crips troops. One of the guys I met was Clay Sloan. You actually met my other friend, Little Monster. Remember him, Krishan Scott? They were enemies. One was a Crip and one was a Blood, but they united. I worked with other people there. I still work with them now that I'm back there. So Clay Sloan did this movie where he's actually made that point. In order for the gangs to become the violent criminal, we're going to kill anybody thing, they had to destroy the political people. You understand? In any form. So the Black Panthers was one of them. So his thing is that we're the bastards of the party that got wiped out. Brown Berets in the Mexican community. The Young Lords, which came out of Chicago and was wiped out. The Young Lords used to be a gang like the Latin Kings. But unlike the Latin Kings, they stayed political and got wiped out. The Latin Kings made a decision, we're not going to be all that political, we'll be criminal, and nobody went after them. It was a decision. I'll give you another example of that, is actually what you're saying. I was at East St. Louis, and anybody's have been to East St. Louis, you know what's a low place. I was there talking, beautiful people, great people, but the place is rough, man. I mean, you're talking about poverty, pain, suffering, but I'm there talking to all these kids, having a great time. So at one point they wanted me to meet with some gangsters. I'm sure. So I'm sitting around, and this one guy's talking, he's an older guy about my age, and he's telling me that he used to be a Black Panther. And he says he was followed everywhere. FBI, phone was tapped, he couldn't do anything. And at a certain point he just gave it up, and he became a drug dealer. You know what he says? Nobody followed me. Nobody tapped my phone. It's sad, but that, he was making a really good point. He said, you know what? When I was a Black Panther, people were after him, but as soon as I selling drugs, nobody cared. You know, so yeah, I think this is actually, I don't think it's an accident. You see what I'm saying?
My friends were Black Panthers. That's not what happened to them. On the west side, they were feeding children. They made sure they had the groceries. They made sure of everything. And Hammer Hand and the guys came and killed them in the middle of the night. The gangs today, these children are miseducated. Johnny cannot read once he goes to high school. So they can't function in this society. So they go and sell drugs. The older guys recruit them. And that's what's happening in the Black community. Especially in the city of Chicago. These children cannot read, and nobody will advocate changing the school system. Nobody. Well, we're going to build more schools. For what? You're not educated. Johnny can't read. Why do you need a new school? Well, we're going to march over here, march over there. Change the curriculum. When I was in junior high school, I learned how to make a Waldorf salad. After school, we had what was called social center. I learned how to make an apron in social center. So therefore, I learned how to cut patterns. They don't have that anymore. No, and it's all by design. All by, and nobody will speak up for it.
Really
they talk about everything else but changing the educational system. Let's build some schools. Let's do it. No, change the educational system. Make sure that Johnny can read, and his sister Janie too.
And you decide, I mean, you're exactly what it is by design. And there's a funny thing in Chicago. When there's all this industry, what did the schools look like? Like the factories that we're going to go into. Now, because the factories are
right.
They look like prisons. They have lockdowns. They use language. They have cops. You got to go to metal detectors.
That's right.
They are preparing kids to end up in the prison.
That's right.
Because you don't prepare people by having an environment that looks like where you want them. You know what I mean?
You don't build new prisons, just let them sit there empty unless you anticipate putting people in there. When they extended, I call it the Audi home, the juvenile center, I told all the people, I said, they're getting ready to lock your children up. Oh, no, hold on a minute. White boy don't build nothing like that unless he's going to make sure he can make some money. My last name is Cohn, K-O-H-N. I'm married, boy, and I know, so you better listen.
2 questions. One, how does the Justice Department position itself on the Palestinian issue? And 2, how do you relate, if at all, to Taco taking our all capitalists out?
Well, the one thing I would tell you, I had a great experience. I was in Paris talking to people, and me and my wife were there in '91. And we went to this French Palestinian center. And they wanted to meet with us because they claimed that they felt like they were like us Mexicans. They felt that the United States, just like Israel, had come into their land. They were there, it's their land. And they had taken it over and everything else, so they wanted to relate to us. And here's an interesting, funny thing about it, is after a while, we couldn't even talk the same language. I had to talk in English or Spanish, I had to be translated to French, and then to Arabic. So we were like, what languages? But we were there for 4 hours, and we had a great talk. And they really, but they really saw themselves as, we're native peoples too, in our land, and we're being undermined. So to me, whatever happens here is reflected in what they do outside of here. Why did they go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan? Why did they do that? Why did they kill all those people? And not only that, it's coming back here. Because a lot of those guns that we sent to those wars, they're in our neighborhoods. And now they got drones. You know, the drones that they got killing civilians. Now, as you know, they're going to bring them in the inner cities. They're going to bring all these police departments are vying to have unmanned drones in our community.
That's right.
And the administration is going to let it happen. So whatever we do here, we take out there, and guess what? Whatever happens out there ends up coming to get us. Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah, I heard it said that what happened in Boston was kind of a prelude of what's to come in terms of, you know, everybody being locked inside of their houses and the police being able to run through, looking without a warrant and chasing after bandits.
But here's the goofy thing about that, including Osama bin Laden, including those Chesney kids, I can't say Chesney very well. They're all right-wingers that the United States supported.
That's right.
The ones that are Vietnam and Canada are people that we bought into power.
That's right.
Not we,
Yeah.
you, if you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't we, it was the government that claimed to, in our name, to do it, but it wasn't us. So you see what I'm saying? And they went after the Black Panthers. They went after all these groups that weren't doing any of this stuff. And here are these people who they supported, gave money, made sure they got involved. They're the ones that are doing all these bombings. You know what I'm saying? They're the ones that are destroying. They're the ones that we brought in there. So Saddam Hussein is our guy. You know what I mean? So that's what's really good.
I mean, what kind of terrible weapons did he have? If he had such terrible weapons, why was he standing in a hole in the ground?
Well, it's all about, they lied about Vietnam. They went there. They lied about what they did in Iraq. I mean, this country's built on lies. I mean, you know, I'm glad we're talking about this. It's true. Look at the
The
natives.
foundation of the structure of the whole company, like country, like this Constitution you throw in our faces all the time. As a native, come on, or as an African American, come on. We weren't people when this stuff was set up. So a foundation is corrupt, like when you build any building. No matter what you build on top of that foundation, it's going to be corrupt and it has to come down.
Exactly.
So, because it was set up against us, but we have to come into forums like this and he's saying, speaking, so that we know what to build after, because it's going to self-implode on itself. I'm not helping it, it's showing itself right there.
Right.
And the only way we fight is with love, that's my thing.
There you go.
Fight with love, and we're all here talking and bringing real issues.
I always tell people, like, people want to make the U.S. Constitution a common thing. But I go, you know what, Native peoples didn't have to have a constitution. They were free, and they didn't know what, nobody had to tell them, this is your freedom, because what that is a very limited warranty. See what I mean? We had the freedoms already. And then they just limited and said, now here's your freedoms. Wait a minute, I had them already, now you just made them all limited. You know, and then like she says,
Self-governing, we
it didn't even
self-govern.
include the black people, it didn't include Native peoples, it didn't even include most of the white people, it included people
Right.
of poverty.
Certainly
So-
not women.
And that's why it's building up, like, oh, come on. I think we have to just, again, like what we're doing, talk the truth, let it out there, and begin to vision another world. And I don't mean that we're not gonna be terrorists, I don't need to destroy anything, but you know, with the poetry, the words, my thoughts, ideas, we got to envision another place, another world. And I know that we can, because I think all of us have that commonality. You know, look at the differences in our skin color, our ethnicities, and yet I think we can sit here and find that same truth. I had a friend that used to say, you know, it doesn't matter what you believe in, when it rains, everybody's gonna get an umbrella. So, yeah, you might think Buddha did it, might think, you know, Jehovah did it, you might think anything, but when it rains, you're all gonna be needing that. So I think we all have our beliefs, which is beautiful. We all have a spiritual practice that are all beautiful. They're fine. But when it comes down to it, the common thing is that, man, we gotta eat, we gotta survive, we gotta feed our kids. What you're talking about, that's what we're talking about. How is our kids gonna live in this world that's already set up against them? We have to change that. And I agree with you, fundamental change, so.
Are you on to the hoax and fraud of 9/11, or do you believe Osama bin Laden did it?
No, Osama bin Laden didn't do it. No. You know what, and here's the thing, even when they killed him, I was always interested as why they threw his body away. I mean, they said it was for Muslim practices. Those people never cared about Muslim practices.
They didn't want to have, I thought it was they didn't want to have something for them to either revere or to have something along there, like, let's just get rid of it, and that's what I thought, but I just, what they say on the news.
Well, you don't know who or what they killed.
Yes.
They hid it.
You know, that's the thing. And no, I think this is a lot more complicated than obviously people are willing to admit. And then now we're stuck with a war that is taking billions and billions a day. And now we look at our economy and I go, well, why are we in this world? You know, in this kind of world, here's what I tell people. We're living in illusions. And I have found that mortgages, that everything's so great, they're all illusions. The wage system is an illusion. Borders are illusions. Borders are made of money, is an illusion. But we're all acting like this is God given. This is what we have to do. You know, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, they used to have those maps of those borders and all the different colors. I thought the world would look like that. And then you see pictures of birds. You can't see those patterns. Earth is a blue, green, white. We're all the same world. There's no. But you think that that's the world? That's a man-made, crazy world that we all live in, and that's all illusion, and we're all living in that
Where
world.
do we learn it?
Yeah.
The education
Education.
system.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the idea about us creating what the vision is for where we're going. I've got a good friend of mine, he's also an artist, activist, lawyer, is the executive director of the Committee on the Bill of Rights. He's a former Chicagoan too, by way of San Francisco, so we get around. Artists and folks who want to create something, we get around doing the actual cultural work and changing what this country looks like. So we had this huge discussion when he was in town the last time about how do you create, if we agree that the Bill of Rights was perhaps created at a different time for a world that no longer exists in that particular way, and how do we go about changing the documents for what we agree upon in order to look and create opportunities for people that look just like we are and think perhaps a little bit more progressively than our founding forefathers. And so I say that sometimes. I'm less sarcastic about saying founding forefathers now at 41 than I was maybe 20 years ago, because I was very critical. I'm a writer. And so when you look at something that's written and then you evaluate it and you realize that it's no longer creating what, if it's a constitution that we're living by and it no longer is as valid as it once was, then how do we change that in order to show that in any kind of system? And the educational system is a big one. It's like, how do you create an American studies curriculum? I mean, when I was in college at DePaul in the 90s, there was the start of something that was called the American Studies curriculum. And now with people trying to remove and ban books and things like that, how do we go back to the basics and say, well, maybe we all need to take an American Studies class, you know, so that we can all remember what our history is, because there's a lot of versions that are out there. And so I got up recently, and I've done a lot of work around immigration reform, and I said what it is now is that we're in an immediate identity crisis that needs to get solved now, not yesterday, because it's becoming very violent, very quickly. And when you have things that happen like Boston, yes, it's a tragedy and it's an unexpected disaster, but there's a prepared disaster plan already put into place. And some of us are not that aware of it because, one, we don't know what our basic rights are, and we also allow folks, other folks to have their human rights violated, in essence. So it's more of a statement kind of to open up more discussion about what is it that we do in order to change. I think creating another party is a good idea. I know many people are are looking at what strategies or what techniques do we need to do in order to change what the educational system looks like. I personally think that we kind of need to go back to freedom schools or teach-ins or things like that in order to create another educational system in order to create, so folks like Luis who have been involved in labor movements and civil rights movements and other, I mean, there's plenty. I mean, I just was on the phone with San Antonio earlier, and there were folks that I sat with for 2 weeks that actually led a lot of the strikes or, you know, the protests. And I mean, they're like a wealth of knowledge, but if it doesn't get documented in one way or another, it disappears when they unfortunately transition onto another world. So part of my work has been is like, okay, how do we capture that information, do the panel discussions at some point, whatever it is, let's talk about it, but not just talking about it, let's do something about it. And you'd be surprised that the youth that know how to use these things, like their frustration comes out, but if you can give them something positive to say and talk about, and they have it already, they can use this and probably communicate it better and quicker globally than we can. At least, and I say that because I'm 40, and I had interns that were like 14 years old that were teaching me how to use Instagram and, you know, keeping me abreast of what the new things is. And they just said, well, what is it that you want done? And let us create it, because we're faster. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I agree. I agree that at least at this point I know what I don't know.
I guess
Well-
maybe have over 20 years as a university teacher, and you know, community teacher and teacher all up the nose. But I think what I really object to in the media and in some discussions is substituting representation of communication for communication. And when kids aren't taught critical thinking, they aren't exposed to a range of ideas. When teachers have their throats, you know, boots on their throats, so they can't develop the curriculum as needed for their own children, but we spend thousands on, you know, consulting fees and all kinds of, you know, reports that nobody reads, you know, and disciplinary actions for the teachers to make sure they're in line. I mean, all the way up from K to 12 to higher ed. No one is really talking about the what's going to be the ground level bed of this kind of education that we all want. You know, what's going to be the given circumstances for this education? It's certainly not more consultants.
So one of the things that I'm working with now, first of all, by the way, if you're interested, this Friday, the Justice Party will have a meeting here in Chicago where I'll be at. Where is it? Because the workers, it's on 333 Ashland, South Ashland.
South Ashland.
53? 333.
It's a union hall.
So it's going to be at 7 o'clock. Again, to me, this is just forums to talk about it. I don't really want to push a party. That's not my point. I'm utilizing the Justice Party as a place to talk about these issues. I know the Greens are out there, there's other people. I mean, I'm not against anybody, but just the more parties, the more voices get out there. But one of the things that's happening that I know we're talking to people about is they say, well, if we can imagine what a healthy, well community looks like, you know, and imagine what it is. The kids are not with guns, they're not on drugs, they are being taught critical thinking, they are given all the tools they need. You know, they can be imaginative, creative, and they can make a living off their own creative capacity, not somebody else down the road. Imagine that they're well in their psychology, in their physical, in their emotional, spiritual, and culturally. You guys should imagine all this. And I go, okay, fine, and that's great, but here's what's going to happen. That wellness is incompatible with this capitalist system.
Right.
It's just incompatible with it. There's no way you can have a good community as long as you have the kind of world that we're in. It is incompatible to the economy that we have and the political world that does not represent us. So what does that mean? That means that in our own battle, to have our own healthy communities, we're going to have to be challenging the very world we're in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we
are going to be, according to the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda and Bono from the group you two, rethink capitalism, reinvent it for the modern world. Okay?
Yeah, may I suggest that capitalism, what is called capitalism on the financial TV stations these days, tends to be successful criminals. They speak for capitalism. So there's no distinction between capitalism and crime anymore. And as a beginning, we ought to make that distinction for starters. I must say, I'm very pleased. I have to congratulate and thank Tina for telling us about
Well, she's a
this.
great connector.
Yes.
And I've known her for
I also want to thank you for bringing such a fresh voice. And I don't think we're going to get out of our bind until we hear the fresh voices among us. You're the best I've heard.
Oh, there you go.
Nice,
You
wow.
haven't heard him yet.
My name is Richard Thomas. I'm a storyteller. And I was at Kathleen's poetry on the beach last summer. And one of the men there gave me this way to contact on the computer about this guy who won, this teacher who won Teacher of the Year. And when he got up to tell about it, or thank them or whatever, he said the reason that, and the reason he was Teacher of the Year is because his students excelled in all sorts of areas. And that's why they voted. And he said the reason they excelled was he wasn't teaching what he was supposed to be teaching. And I was wondering, why doesn't the teachers union or whatever, why they don't seem to know about this type of thing. And my last comment is that I've discovered some stuff that I think children and students should know, but you hear no talk about it, that in 1957, two Chinese American physicists got Nobel Physics Award for proving that a metal has consciousness. 10 years later, two engineers at the University of California made a metal that can grow, and it's called TRIP, for transformation-induced plasticity. And maybe many of you know about the guy, Masaru Emoto, who came up with the consciousness of water.
Right.
And that water knows what we're talking and thinking about, and he has ways to, you can prove it to yourself. And anyway, he's, stuff like this, would make children
Interesting.
and not only that, the last point, is that maybe the school should be called magician studies. And the reason I say that is because it would be more fun-filled. Actually, I actually do believe that dirt is magical, because dirt really is star stuff. And the molten stuff you see coming out of volcanoes and stuff, running about 200 miles an hour down the mountainside, you can't outrun it. But, that stuff is both solid and liquid at the same time. And I say that's the definition of magic time. And I think that's why these people find consciousness in the dirt, which is metal form of, and so,
That's pretty interesting.
well, anyway,
I'd like to ask everyone present that if they happen to know an interested lawyer. Mary and I have a case where we were locked up in the federal lockup downtown. We're facing the rest of our lives in prison until 15 months later we proved that the only evidence against us, an FBI audio tape, was a criminal fabrication. Meanwhile, our lawyers got us a tip to go to the Winnetka Police Department to look at the Langert family murder investigation reports to find out that the very same lead FBI agent, Edward Buckley, had framed me for the murder of 3 people I'd never heard of in my whole life. But the murderer saved me from perhaps the lethal injection by blabbing through his FBI cover. He had used an FBI gun to commit the murders. He's now in Pontiac prison now. Anyway, long story short, if you know any lawyer who'd want to take a case against the FBI for us, it would be very helpful. And also the FBI was able to get the IRS to attack me, and they robbed me of thousands of dollars from a time when I worked in El Salvador on a hydroelectric project, where they claimed that they had not paid taxes during that year at that time. prior to going there, I had received an exemption. All Americans there were exempt from U.S. taxes if they would go there because it had become so dangerous, and they need to keep American goods going down there. So I have a case for anyone who would take it. There's been a huge crimes perpetrated by the IRS at the instigation of the FBI. So if anyone who knows a lawyer who would take such cases, justice would be done, and what's more, it would free up our reputations, because one of the FBI moles among us at the time, we were anti-war and pro-peace, he has since said that all these FBI crimes against us were to provide deeper cover for Mary and me by the FBI.
Oh.
So and that was published in the London Times newspaper and then republished again just a year ago. So we're faced with continuing smears and crimes by the FBI through a mole, and they're saying that we are the moles. So anyways, I don't want to take any more time here, but anyone who knows a lawyer...
Sounds like a house of mirrors.
Justice.
You tried the ACLU? The
Pardon me?
ACLU?
Yes.
won't
They
cover
turned
it?
us down 3 times.
Did you try reaching, Northwestern, I think?
They have the legal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
They
almost,
have-
yeah, we had, the only attorney who ever said yes, and by the way, they all said yes for either 24 or 48 hours, and then every, like 100, got back to us, said, we just found out we've got a big workload in this town. But Jeff Erdangen said he would take the case, but that he was going to contact his buddy, what was the name again there?
Larry, that's
Yeah,
it.
Larry Marshall,
I know them.
that he would only take our case of Larry Marshall, but he wanted to do it. If he and Larry Marshall worked together, they would do it. Larry Marshall refused to do it. And so that was our big hope was Jeff Erdangen.
And Bernadine Dorn is at the.
Yes,
West-
Bernadine doing this.
Yeah, so you can try them, but I think Bernadine just retired, right?
Yeah, I think both she and Bill retired.
Yeah, so I don't know, that might be the way to go to the Northwest Legal Clinic.
Durland in Colorado Springs might consider it, and Cunningham, Durland, D-U-R-L-A-N-D,
Okay, thank
in
you.
Colorado Springs, and Cunningham, Dennis Cunningham in San Francisco might consider it.
Thank you. And I must say, I think we've taken up
Well,
valuable time here, so we'd like
Part of
to...
the story is,
Yeah,
We've got about 7 minutes left,
so.
and we'd like some poetry.
Yeah, I don't mind. I
Yeah.
really appreciate this discussion. I love these kind of talks. And you know that stuff. We need to know what's going on. So I really appreciate you being here. I could like to do another poem, and then maybe we can just talk and relax and get to know each other. I'm going to read a poem. Again, I never know what I'm going to read, but I'm going to read a poem about my first poetry reading, and just to get back to how things come and get you. Again, I was a heroin addict. I went to Berkeley, California, all strung out, and I went to my first poetry reading. So even though I was writing stuff in jail and juvenile hall, I didn't know what I was doing. I did nothing. Then I actually go to poetry reading. Now, some people go to poetry reading and don't get nothing out of it, right? It changed my life. You understand what I mean? When I heard these poets reading down with their words, and the 3 poets were, this is in 73, long time ago, was Jose Montoya, who was we call the godfather of Chicano poetry, David Henderson, who was the leading African-American poet at the time, and my good friend Pedro Pietri, the Puerto Rican poet, who passed on as well. Amazing poets. When you hear these guys, anyway, so this is the poem about that. I want to end with that just so you know how things work out. We have a lot to do in this country. We have a lot to say. I'm for making it into art. Let's do more poetry, more art. Let's get more people out there. How are we going to change people, get people to bring out what they have inside of them? To me, the artistic, creative space is the one thing that they can't take away from you. You know what I'm saying? They can take away everything, but you can't get rid of your imagination. Your imagination is inside of you, it's abundant. You can never exhaust it. You always can be imaginative.
I just want to say something about imagination
Yeah.
in terms of the Common Core. I just finished my master's degree in secondary education, language arts. I don't have a job yet, so I've been studying up a lot on Common Core, and they have an overemphasis, I feel, from my perspective, on nonfiction. And I think that this focus on nonfiction is going to help diminish
Oh, I see.
the imaginations of our children.
Thank you. Hello.
And their critical
Hey.
thinking.
And their critical thinking.
It's the way
Yeah,
that
no,
they're
so
able to
absolutely.
learn.
So we're gonna end with this poem, but actually stick around a little bit. We'll talk some more. And again, you're welcome to come Friday to the Justice Party event. Even if you don't want to be part of the Justice Party, that's not important. Just be there, just to talk the issues. So this poem is called Favorite Shapes, and it goes like this. I wallowed in a needle-spawned world, addicted to dope and a crazy life, and yet there I was in Berkeley for my first poetry reading. I was 18 with a bullet, as they say. Earlier I had flown on a plane for the first time. Sure, I've survived half a dozen gun assaults, cops knocking me around, overdoses, blades to my neck in jail cells, homeless in dank streets and beatdowns and body of bras. But flying, that scared me to death. I sat there in a crowded cafe not knowing what to expect. Poetry? I never heard this before. Oh, I had written lines, vignettes, images, fears, thoughts. I didn't know they were poems. I had no idea what a poem was. First up on the mic was Jose Montoya, with Chicano prayers of old pachucos and strained loves and guitar solos and Indian hands and cornflower. Then David Henderson took the stage, gleaming urban black streets, racist stares, Black Panther fury, and Southern cooking. Finally, Pedro Prietsky came up, Neo-Rican wordmeister, flashing at various experiences with poems located in phone booths and real-life wisdoms that made us laugh and shake our heads. I had never heard words spoken this way. More music than talk, more fevered shapes than sentences, more Che and Malcolm than Shakespeare. These poems came from me, lacered my throat, demanded my life savings, taking me for a sunset ride. These poems were graffiti scrawls along the alleys and trash-strewn tunnels of my body, the metaphoric methadone for the heroin hurling through my bloodstream, the lifeline I already had inside and didn't know. These poems were pool sticks, darkened gangways, a swirl of sunrise after the graveyard shift, a blood-black yelling behind torn curtains, a child screaming and nobody coming to help. These poems were shadowed intent, startled doubt, sorrows without grief, the moon without sky, unknown melodies, the falling inside that happens when you push razor onto wrist. They came for me as I sank into my suicide, fidgeting in a chair, inching under the skin as I wondered why I even came. Jose, David, and Pedro, I was never the same after this. They came for me and I've never let go. They came for me and I've perspired poems ever since. They came for me and all my addictions, my sorry-ass lives, my falling masks, my pissed-off wives, neglected children, angry friends, and back-to-back failures could never ever take them away. Wow. More friends have come, so thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I have some stuff.
We have time for one more poem.
Yes.
Do you have lips?
I do. You want to? Okay.
I want to hear.
All right, so we'll hear a special request. And this poem, by the way, became, I've been doing these men's conferences for 20 years in the Redwood Forest in California. This became like the signature poem for those men's conferences. And the reason why is because when you're with men, just men for 6 days, you really long for lips. You know what I mean? After a while, I was like, man, I'm tired of you guys. So I'm going to read you this poem. There you go. Oh, there it is. So this is a poem I'll read for them, and it's a Chicago poem, and it goes like this. I sat in Chicago traffic, waiting for a light to change. My fingers scored a rhythm on top of the metal door, while faces stared down from third-floor bay windows. Not to intrude, but from behind a blue Toyota, I spotted them. Lips, perfect red with thin creases and slightly opened. Lips like candy encased in a rectangular side view mirror. My car was just behind the Toyota, the back of a woman's head the back of a woman's head in front of me. But in the mirror, just lips, enormous as they rubbed the sides of the plastic rim. The lips took off after the next green. I pressed the accelerator, unmindful of the old lady trying to cross the street with bags on both arms. I was compelled to look at those lips, even as they rushed through a yellow light, forcing me to risk the red. The lips carried with them the soul of skin, the summer of a smile taking me home. Lips like being cradled in a soft rain, making me do a perfect backflip into wet memory. Lips whispering to my ear, licking the side of my mouth, hiding secrets behind honeyed faces. It didn't matter what the woman looked like. She had lips. Then the turn signals flashed and lips made a left-hand turn. I continued on over the ruptured streets, thinking of lips through the flames of afternoon traffic.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the Poetry Saloon at noon. And we are at the Newberry Library. And this is, the date, May 20th,
May 20th.
2013. Luis Rodriguez, thank you. And everyone, our guests, poets and artists, thank you. See you again.
What's your name? Jane Cohen. Nice to meet you. Of course. Of course.
When do you graduate? And I said, I don't know. He said, what do you mean you don't know? How many credits you have? I said, I've never checked. I didn't even know where to go. That's the fog I was in. So the guy said, well, let's go check now. And he takes me to his office, and I found out about the incomplete I can graduate. And I think I must have had, I was intoxicated, great at everything. Working for the man for the last 6 months. My dad died, and I know I must have had a sketch about me. I never said anything about it. And the professor said, how you off the window? And I think they wanted to get me out of there. So they only asked me 1 or 2 questions about history and told me, you know, you pass, you go now. And I went to treatment in New York for 17 months, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I graduated. Oh my God. Woke up in that's what I didn't think alcohol had anything to do with it. Some guys in there said, if you didn't get the money, you knew it. And in the day, I'll make trouble.
Yeah, but I'm taking a lot of culture right now in Chicago.
I didn't think
It's coming up to it. Yeah, I know.
They'll be hugging, telling stuff before the fact. And it's just infuriated me, not running to business people right down to business. And I would get up and storm out of there. Slam the I was headed.
You do know. I am. Link you up on Facebook.
And they had to let me call. I'm not sure. It sounded exactly like this. Don't you want to go to bed with Nixon? I walked into the meeting, and they voted me to be the chairman. And they were angry because it was a Saturday night. Places and, they were getting angry. Now, you know, you're going to accept yes or no. And I said, no, I did. Really uncanny. I didn't know I was brilliant, that they needed me to be their leader.
Oh my goodness.
And the chairperson, you know, had a key and
They don't come fixing it.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, but I've heard of it, you know.
Clean.
And here's the thing,